I want to bring into the conversation now legal analyst Jeremy Rosenthal. Jeremy, thanks so much for being with us here on Live Now. Of course, Bryan Kohberger, we had been tracking this case all along. It was a bombshell announcement when he accepted a plea deal, but now the gag order has been lifted. How important is this going to be for all of us out there who are still wanting to know more details about what happened that night?
It's extremely important, and the tidal wave of information is going to start now. We're already starting to learn a lot of details and facts that we were never privy to about perhaps the motive of this, how the families are feeling about this, and really for the first time getting a good look behind the curtain. Until this point, it was gagged. And really the concern here was, even though there was a guilty plea, the judge in Idaho is not legally bound to accept that plea, which he did, and then he's not bound by the punishment that is recommended, which is a life sentence. So in theory, more information could have actually come in and affected the outcome still, even though it's pretty well resolved. Trial judge came in and said, no, none of that's a concern. Now's the time for the daylight, the sunshine that we're going to have to disinfect all of the conspiracy theories, all of the speculation. And so now we really get to go to town. Now we get to sort of learn and figure out what this was about, and hopefully so we can avoid tragedies like this in the future.
I have to ask you, Jeremy, we heard that the defense attorneys there in Kohberger's case didn't want this gag order to be lifted. Does that all have to do with affecting the sentencing, as you said?
You would think so, because, again, the judge has several options during a guilty plea in Idaho. The judge can accept the plea, or the judge can reject the plea. If the judge rejects the plea and says, I'm not going to accept this plea because of something I learned because of this, well, then you could be back in a situation where there's a death penalty potentially back on the table. So you've done all this work to sort of avoid the death penalty. And in a case like this, make no mistake about it, your goal is to save your client's life. It would be wonderful for the defense lawyers in this case to try to acquit their client of this. Obviously, I think what we're going to see is that there was just too much evidence against him, too many damning facts against him. So then what's your goal? Well, your goal at that point is mitigation and avoiding a death sentence, which they made a deal to give themselves that relief already. So that's kind of what I think the defense was really concerned about here, was that that the judge might reject the order based on something that the judge had learned from the media after the fact.
And so, Jeremy, I have to ask you, while this gag order has officially been lifted, we're just seeing some of the victims there as well on the folks' screen. We finally heard as the police chief there in Moscow spoke out for the first time, talking to some of these news outlets, saying that we've been focused on the victims and bringing justice for the victims. That was our focus. That was our mission. So that mission was completed. So saying that by getting this guilty plea, their mission was completed. But sometimes some of those family members who've been speaking out don't necessarily feel that way.
Yeah, that's one of the fascinating things that I think we're learning about here. The Gonclaves family is very upset with this. They wanted the death penalty for Bryan Kohberger. There's other families, the Chapin family, the Mogan family were very pleased with this. They want to be done with this. They want to learn answers. That's one of the frustrating parts for prosecutors, for district attorneys, for police, is when you have multiple victims, you're simply not going to make everybody happy. And every family is no less a victim than in any of the other families. So we are going to see some of that strife bubble to the surface. Already we've seen the Gonclaves family, we've seen Steve Gonclave disagree with the prosecutor in court. In court, the district attorney's office let it be known, I believe on July 2nd, that there was no sexual motive, that there was no sexual intent by Bryan Kohberger. But Mr. Gonclaves is privy to something that we don't know exactly what it is, that said exactly the opposite, that they do think that this is the result of some type of sexual perversion or interest of Mr. Kohberger. These are the types of details that I think we're going to see boil over. But I also see that there's a lot of instability just at the ground level with a lot of these families. Certainly nobody can blame them. And it's a very contentious situation still, even though the case is resolved.
And so also when asked, the police chief, if they were able to find a clear motive, he simply said he couldn't answer at this time. Are we going to get those answers specifically? Because ultimately, Kohberger never has to speak out publicly at this point either after accepting this plea deal.
This is what posterity is going to look like. And we might learn more and more about this in 5, 10, 20, 30, 50 years from now. We learn things repeatedly about serial killers like Ted Bundy. They give interviews, and sometimes we can take them at face value or not. Probably we shouldn't. Probably we should take anything that a killer like this tells us with a grain of salt. But criminology, criminal justice experts, psychologists, psychiatrists can all sort of dig in, and we can try to learn some of those deeper level questions that I think are really important to understand a brain like this that I don't know is understandable. He gave an interview. One of the other things that we learned was that in Pullman, Washington, he interviewed for a job there with police, and he wasn't hired because they thought he was awkward. They thought he was a little weird. And then when they found out that he was the suspect, the police chief says the hair on his neck stood up on the back of his neck, which is completely understandable. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to learn things throughout certainly throughout the next few weeks, but then through the years, through documentaries, through other studies that are done here. But hopefully we'll learn more. But I don't expect the pain to be any less.
And certainly that's what so many of those family members have been discussing, is that the pain that they have them for losing those students like this. It still gives you a little bit of a chill up your spine when you think about this entire case. Jeremy, anything else that we should be paying attention to as we're heading closer and closer to sentencing?
I would just sort of pay attention to the families, the victims, kind of their thoughts, showing them the respect, the attention that they deserve. Certainly, what's got to be difficult here is that they're not all on the same page. So this was a very difficult decision for the elected district attorney to make out there. There may or may not be political repercussions for that. So that's sort of what I'm paying attention to. But I think everybody is on the same page here, that there's going to be some finality at last, and now we're going to start getting answers. Also, from what I'm hearing too, we're also learning a little bit. The gag order in this case was a very, very early one, surprisingly so, and law enforcement was kind of frustrated by that because they were not able to quell a lot of the rumors, and they were stuck kind of following bad leads because they couldn't disseminate information that the public ought to know, and so it sort of had almost the opposite effect of spreading panic instead of allowing police to really sort of calm things. So I think we're going to learn a lot of things in the future for how to deal with these types of situations, these types of murders.
And there they are, the 4 victims there on your screen, unfortunately, who were killed inside of that Idaho home there on the college campus. Of course, this was a sad story, but coming to somewhat of a conclusion. Of course, as we said, sentencing is set to be next month. And once that gets underway, we'll certainly bring you those updates here on Live Now from Fox. And we certainly appreciate, as always, legal analyst Jeremy Rosenthal for being with us here to discuss the very latest. Jeremy, thanks so much for joining us.